Alright, this is Fear on Shelf Prologue, Book of the Skill. And I think I really kept this one because of this cover. It is a good cover. We've got Red Skullman there, he's the baddie, and for some reason he's really big. He's massive. It's like he's had a big growth spurt. And he's about to chew down on Captain America and Seaman. Must be really hungry. Very good cover. This is the prologue chapter for a big Marvel crossover called Fear on Shelf. And Fear on Shelf, it could probably have been a good little story if it wasn't published concurrent with Alex Alfonso becoming Marvel's editor-in-chief. At its core, Fear on Shelf is a Captain America and Thor team-up story. It was meant to capitalise on both of them characters having their first films out at the cinema, but rather than naturally tell this story with the relevant characters, Alex Alfonso insisted that it be expanded into a line-wide crossover, and that is something that he would do with virtually everything. He was really, really eager to recreate and recapture the enormous success that Jose Quesada had with Civil Wars. So we start this off, we have got Baron Zero, really good character, and this is Red Skull Girl, that is Red Skullman's daughter, and they have been searching for one of Red Skullman's hidden bases, and they have found it really quickly, so it mustn't have been hidden that well. It is a secret Nazi base in the middle of the desert. It's probably filled with loads of copies of Skyver Frog by Nathan Van Scribbler that he will never send out to his incel comic gates as fans. I really like the use of these two characters. They play off each other well, and it actually makes good use of some continuity, some forgotten continuity from odd issues of Captain America. When Red Skull Girl was introduced in the late 80s, Baron Zero, he was in that story as well, and they were often at each other's throats, and well, it's just nice to see, it's refreshing to see some actual continuity and that very specific, forgotten about piece of history play out again here. Just so refreshing. So they are at the fulfillment centre for Skyver Frog, and they actually find this weird, they find this special variant edition of the comic which has been bound using the skin of the seamen from Atlantis. Because you see, they have got blue skin, and famously Skyver Frog's creator, Nathan Van Scribbler, well, he is a massive Nazi comic book artist, and he just hates any people who have got a different skin colour or colours. So this is sick, this. He offered, on Indiegogo, he offered a super expensive rare perk to order a copy of Skyver Frog that has been bound in the skin of persons of colour. What a hate-filled little grifter. And as you can see from this story, he still hasn't actually shipped the fucking comic out. Most of this story is a flashback setting up the general plot for Fear on Shelf back in the medieval times or something. There were all these Nazis about, and they actually discovered a hammer like Thor's hammer, a magic hammer from fairyland. So we see Captain America and Seaman and Bucky. They are trying to stop the evil Nazis, and this bit here is really good. They find an evil Nazi blood sacrifice of seamen, and this page makes fantastic use of silence, because Seaman, Well, he's really upset to see his seamen smeared on crosses like this. And the only dialogue is here when Captain America says, "Just say the word, seaman. What do you need us to do?" And seaman guns cut them down. And then they like burn the remains, and it's powerful stuff. So obviously they start punching Nazis in the face, and eventually they fight a ferryman from fairyland, and it's all good fun, very decent setup. And the big shame is that Fear on Shelf, it wasn't allowed to just be told naturally. It was actually the first big Marvel crossover in a long time that hadn't been written by Michael Bryan Benson. So just on that basis alone, it was better. But I really do think there is a really good story at the basic level that got ruined by the corporate mandate of making it into a crossover. The main crossover, the miniseries, it was written by a writer called Maths Fractions, who was at the time writing Thor's comic. He was also writing Iron Man. And this issue here, the Prologue chapter, this was written by Maths Fractions' sometimes writing partner, English Lit Paper. And at the time, he was also writing Captain America's comic and one of the Avengers books, Secret Avengers, I think. So I reckon if you had just let them two writers tell this story, you would have come out of it with a much better story. Because what happens with Fear on Shelf is it goes from being the Nazis have got a forehammer to there being loads and loads of other forehammers as well. And that just takes away from the nice and direct, the simple story that this sets up that could encompass all the books that Maths Fractions and English Lit Paper were also writing. Like Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, the Avengers. And the threat, it works best if it is just as simple as it is presented here. Evil Nazi Red Skull Girl, subscriber to Comic Artist Pro Secrets on YouTube. She has found out where there is another hammer that is just like Thor's hammer, and now she picks it up and she has got 4 powers. Really simple story, but in the crossover there was suddenly like 8 other villains who also got magic hammers. And that just diminishes the threat of evil Nazi Red Skull Girl, and even diminishes the threat of themselves when there's 7, 8 other people with the exact same powers. And some of those baddies, they are barely even in it. Most of the tie-in issues were just heroes fighting one of the people with hammers, or some of them had nothing to do with the whole story whatsoever. Like Michael Bryan Benson's Avengers issues, which are unreadable. They tied into the crossover, and he was so disinterested in playing with someone else's crossover, with someone else's story, that he just ignored it. He didn't expand on anything. He just told his own boring little vignette. So we have this here. This is a preview for the main mini-series by Maths Fractions. It could have been a good story, but it was just overpacked with Alex Alfonso's directive to somehow expand this Captain America and Thor story into a line-wide crossover that could incorporate every book they publish. And this is a good setup issue, and it's sad because it's a constant teaser for a much better, a much tighter version of Fear on Shelf that we just never got. We've got our clear focuses in this. We've got Captain America, we've got Red Skull Man and his daughter. We've got the Fairyland mythology, which obviously incorporates Thor. We've got Seaman, he's really prominent in this, and he's not really part of the story after this. I think he had a mini-series, a Defenders mini-series, but completely irrelevant to the main story. And despite also being in this prologue really prominently, Baron Zero isn't in the story at all after this. I imagine maybe he was lost in favour of all those other characters getting hammers. He does have a very small part in the Thunderballs tie-in issues, but now whatever comes of his temporary alliance here with Red Skull Girl, and that could have been a fun extra element for the story and a way to actually incorporate the Thunderballs as well, but never happens. I might do another video looking at Fear on Shelf more in depth, talking about what I think the story should be maybe. But this is a great lead-in issue. It seems really promising and exciting, and the only problem I really have with it is that I'm still waiting for the release of the great story that this comic was setting up. We've got this beautiful cover too by a foreigner. I rate this one 7 thumbs up.